Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi, everyone. We are very happy to see you here today.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're talking about a small English phrase that can make your conversations sound much more natural. I have to admit something first. I keep telling myself that I'll practice English every day, but after 2 or 3 days, I become busy, lose my routine, and forget my plan. Then a new week begins, and I make the same promise again.
I think many English learners will recognize that feeling. Wanting to improve is easy, but staying consistent is the difficult part. The good news is that native speakers have a simple phrase they often use when they decide to change a habit. That phrase is, from now on.
I hear it in movies and podcasts all the time, but I wasn't always sure how people used it naturally. Does it simply mean today, or does it have a deeper meaning?
Great question. From now on means that you are making a change that starts now and continues into the future. It isn't just about today. It shows commitment. You're saying that life will be different because you've made a decision.
So if I say, from now on, I'll practice English every evening, I'm telling people this isn't just a random idea, it's my new plan.
That's right. Compare it with saying, I'll practice English. That sounds like a promise, but from now on, I'll practice English every evening sounds stronger because you're changing a habit. I like that difference. It feels more confident. Let me try another example. From now on, I'll read 1 page in English before bed. That's a natural sentence. Here's another one. From now on, I'm going to write 5 new words in my notebook every morning. Native speakers often use both will and going to after this phrase, depending on the situation. Can we use it outside English learning? Of course. Imagine someone says, from now on, I'll wake up earlier. Another person might say, from now on, I'm bringing my lunch to work. Someone else might say, from now on, I'll spend less time on my phone. They all describe a lasting change. I noticed something interesting. The phrase isn't about wishing, it's about deciding. That's an important point. Saying, I hope I study more is a wish. Saying, from now on, I'll study for 20 minutes every day is a decision with action behind it. Maybe that's why the phrase sounds motivating. It reminds us that improvement begins with one choice, followed by small actions. I agree. Nobody becomes fluent overnight, but small daily habits can create big progress over time. If you keep making simple promises and following them, your confidence will grow little by little. I think I've made my own decision. From now on, I'm going to stop waiting for the perfect moment and simply begin practicing every day. That's a wonderful mindset, and it's a great example of how native speakers naturally use from now on when they're ready to make a meaningful change. I like how that phrase feels. It isn't dramatic, but it sounds serious. If someone says, from now on, I expect a real change, not just a nice idea. That's one reason native speakers use it so often. They don't save it for big life decisions. They use it in ordinary conversations about everyday habits. Those small changes are where you'll hear it most.
Let's imagine 2 friends are talking. One says, I'll study English. That's a good sentence, but it feels a little open. Maybe they'll study and maybe they won't. Now, listen to this version. From now on, I'll study English every morning. It sounds more personal because the speaker has chosen a routine. There's direction and consistency. I like that comparison because both sentences are correct, but they leave different impressions. One is simply a future plan. The other sounds like a commitment that begins today and continues.
That's right. That's why this phrase is so useful for English learners. It helps you express determination in a natural way without using difficult vocabulary.
Let's think about a simple morning routine. Maybe I wake up, make a cup of coffee, and spend 10 minutes speaking English before checking my phone. I could tell my friend, from now on, I'll speak English every morning before breakfast.
That sounds very natural. Notice that you included a specific habit. Native speakers often connect from now on with actions they can repeat.
Here's another one. From now on, I'll read one English article every day. That sounds much more realistic than saying, I'll read for 3 hours every day. I agree. Small goals are easier to keep, and they also sound believable in conversation. If you tell someone you're building a daily habit, they'll probably encourage you instead of doubting you. Reading isn't the only activity. Many learners enjoy watching English videos because they hear natural pronunciation and useful expressions.
Right, someone might say, from now on, I'm going to watch one short English video every evening. That sounds like something you could hear between friends or classmates.
I also love keeping an English notebook. Whenever I learn a new word or expression, I write it down with my own example sentence. It helps me remember it later.
That's another great opportunity to use today's phrase. You could say, from now on, I'll keep an English notebook with me wherever I go. It's simple, practical, and easy to imagine.
I think these examples have something in common. None of them are impossible. They're realistic changes that fit into everyday life.
That's an important observation. Native speakers often make commitments that feel achievable. Instead of promising huge changes, they talk about habits they can maintain.
I also notice that when people say, from now on, they usually sound confident. They don't rush the phrase. They say it clearly because they want the listener to understand that something is changing.
Good pronunciation helps too. Say the whole phrase smoothly instead of stopping after each word. When it's spoken naturally, it becomes one comfortable expression in the sentence rather than 3 separate words.
The more I hear these examples, the more confident I feel about using the phrase in my own conversations. It feels practical instead of formal.
That's the goal. Practice it with your own daily routines, and before long, saying from now on will become as natural as the habits you're creating.
Now that I feel comfortable using from now on, I want to test myself. I'm going to say a few sentences, and you can tell me whether they sound natural.
That sounds like a fun challenge. Go ahead.
Here's the first one. From now on, I learned English every day.
That's a common mistake. From now on points towards the present and the future, so it doesn't work with the past action like learned. A natural sentence would be, from now on, I'll learn English every day, or from now on, I'm going to learn English every day.
I see. The phrase looks forward, not backward. That's the key idea. It introduces a new direction. Let me try another one. From now on, yesterday was different.
That one doesn't work either because yesterday is already finished. If you're talking about something that changed in the past and continued after that point, native speakers often use from then on. So I could say, I joined an English club last year. From then on, I felt more confident speaking. Perfect. In that sentence, you're talking about a change that began at a specific moment in the past and continued after it.
I think I understand the difference now. From now on starts today. From then on starts at a point in the past.
You've got it.
Here's another sentence. From now on, my class begins tomorrow.
That sounds a little unusual because you're talking about a starting date but has already been decided. A native speaker would probably say, beginning tomorrow, my class starts at 9, or simply, my class begins tomorrow.
So, beginning tomorrow focuses on a future starting point, while from now on focuses on changing a habit immediately.
That's a helpful way to think about it.
What about this sentence? In the future, I'll probably travel to Canada.
That's a good use of in the future. Notice that it doesn't promise a change that starts today, it only talks about a possible time later in life.
So if I say, from now on, I'll travel to Canada, it sounds strange because traveling isn't a repeated habit that begins today.
Right. Most listeners would expect an ongoing action after from now on. That's why in the future fits your sentence much better.
I have one last example. Starting today, I'll spend 15 minutes reviewing vocabulary.
That's a great sentence. It has almost the same meaning as, from now on, I'll spend 15 minutes reviewing vocabulary.
The difference is very small. Starting today emphasizes the first day, while from now on emphasizes the continuing habit. That comparison really helps. These expressions are similar, but each has its own purpose. And that's what makes your English sound more natural. Instead of using one phrase everywhere, you choose the expression that matches the situation. Little choices like these make your sentences clearer and easier for native speakers to understand. We've spent some time understanding when to use from now on, so let's imagine how it sounds in everyday conversations. Picture a student talking with a teacher after class. I can already hear it. The teacher asks, "How are your studies going?" The student smiles and says, "I've been distracted lately, but from now on, I'll finish my homework before dinner every day." That response feels honest. The student admits there was a problem and immediately explains the new plan. Teachers hear promises all the time, but adding "from now on" shows that the student is thinking about changing a routine instead of making a quick excuse. Now let's imagine two friends meeting at a coffee shop. One friend says, "You disappeared. We haven't practiced English together in weeks." The other friend laughs and replies, "Life became busy, but from now on, let's meet every Saturday morning again." I like that example because the phrase isn't only about yourself. You can also include another person in your plan. That's true. It can become a shared commitment. How about work? Suppose a manager notices that reports have been arriving late. An employee might respond, "I understand the concern. From now on, I'll send every report before the deadline." That's polite, responsible, and focused on the solution instead of the mistake. Notice that nobody is making a dramatic speech. They're simply explaining what will change. That's how native speakers often communicate. They prefer practical language over long explanations. Let's move to a family conversation. Imagine a daughter saying, "I've been spending too much time on my phone." Her father smiles and says, "What are you going to do about it?" She answers, "From now on, we'll eat dinner together without our phones." That sounds warm because the change involves everyone. Here's another situation that happens every year. Friends start talking about New Year's resolutions. One person says, "From now on, I'm going to take better care of my health." Another says, "From now on, I'll read more books instead of scrolling through social media every evening." Even though people often make resolutions in January, the phrase itself isn't connected to one season. You can decide to improve on any day of the year. That's an important reminder. A new habit doesn't have to wait for a special date. One more scene. Someone walks into an English-speaking club for the first time and feels nervous. Another member notices and says, "Don't worry, everyone starts somewhere." The new member smiles and replies, "From now on, I'm going to join every weekly meeting, even if I make mistakes." That's a wonderful example because confidence grows through participation, not perfection. Every situation we've discussed today shows the same pattern. Someone recognizes a change that needs to happen, expresses it naturally, and moves forward with a clear intention instead of looking back. Those conversations remind me that learning English isn't about finding one perfect method. It's about building habits that fit naturally into your day. I couldn't agree more. People often ask me how they can improve faster, and my answer is usually much simpler than they expect. My first suggestion is keeping a vocabulary journal. Whenever I hear an interesting word or expression, I don't just write the meaning, I also create a sentence that feels personal. That way, the word becomes part of my own life instead of staying on a list. That's a smart habit because you're connecting vocabulary with real situations. Your brain remembers stories better than isolated words. Another habit I enjoy is shadowing. I'll play a short conversation, listen carefully, and repeat what I hear. I try to copy the rhythm and the natural pauses instead of worrying about every tiny detail. Shadowing helped me a lot when I was improving my speaking skills. I spent only 15 minutes a day doing it. That doesn't sound like much, but I practiced almost every day, and those minutes added up over time. That's encouraging because many learners believe they need several hours every day before they can make progress. Not at all. A short daily routine is often easier to maintain than a long study session once a week. I also recommend speaking aloud even when you're alone. Read a short paragraph, describe what you see around you, or explain what you're planning to do later. Your mouth becomes more comfortable producing English sounds. People sometimes feel awkward doing that, but it's a wonderful practice. Speaking is a physical skill, and regular repetition helps build confidence. Here's another habit that receives not enough attention. Review your mistakes instead of hiding them. If I notice that I used the wrong tense or forgot a useful expression, I write the corrected sentence and read it again later. That's something I still do. Mistakes aren't signs of failure, they're useful reminders of what to practice next. I think the biggest lesson is that consistency matters more than perfection. Missing one day doesn't mean giving up completely. I like to think of learning as a long walk instead of a race. Some days you move quickly and other days you move slowly, but you're still moving forward. That's why today's phrase fits so well with language learning. It encourages steady action rather than short bursts of motivation. Build habits that you can enjoy, celebrate small improvements, and trust the process. When your routine becomes part of your everyday life, your English will continue growing naturally, one conversation, one notebook page, and one practice session at a time. We've spent today's conversation exploring one useful expression, but native speakers don't rely on the same phrase every time they talk. They naturally switch between similar expressions depending on the situation. That's one of the easiest ways to make your English sound more fluent. You don't need hundreds of new phrases, you just need to know when a few common ones fit best. Let's start with starting today. It feels very direct. If someone says, starting today, I'm going to drink more water, the listener immediately knows when the change begins. That's true. It highlights the first day of the new habit. Compare that with from now on, which puts more attention on the habit continuing into the future. So if my teacher asks when I'll begin reviewing vocabulary, I could answer, starting today, I'll review 10 words every evening. That's a natural response. Now here's another expression that sounds a little stronger, from this day forward. I don't hear that one as often. Neither do I. It's still correct, but it sounds more formal or emotional. You might hear it in an important speech, at a wedding, or during a meaningful conversation, rather than an everyday chatting. So if someone simply wants to improve their English routine, from now on usually sounds more relaxed. I would choose it almost every time. Here's another expression I hear quite often, no more excuses. That's a great one because it shows determination. Imagine someone saying, no more excuses, I'm practicing English every evening after work. It sounds energetic and motivating.
I also like, I'm going to stick with it. That tells people you won't quit after a few days.
Right. Maybe your friend asks, do you think you'll keep studying this time? You could smile and say, yes, I'm going to stick with it.
Then there's, this time I'm serious.
That's a wonderful expression after you've tried something before without success. It suggests you've learned from your past experience.
I can imagine saying, I've started studying English several times before, but this time I'm serious.
That sounds honest and natural.
Another phrase I enjoy is, I've made up my mind.
I use that one when I've finished thinking about a decision. For example, I've made up my mind. I'm joining the English speaking club next week.
Finally, we have, I'm turning things around.
That's a positive expression for changing a situation that hasn't been going well. Someone who hasn't practiced for months might say, I'm turning things around. From now on, I'm studying every morning before work. I like how these phrases work together. Instead of repeating one phrase again and again, you can choose the one that matches your feelings and your situation. That's one of the habits of confident speakers. They have different ways to express the same idea, and that variety makes their conversations sound more natural, more interesting, and much closer to the way native speakers communicate every day. Looking back at everything we've discussed today, I think the biggest lesson isn't really about one expression. It's about making a decision and following it with small actions that become part of your daily life. I feel the same way. Language learning doesn't change because of one exciting day. It changes because of hundreds of ordinary days spent practicing a little at a time. We started by learning that from now on is more than a time expression. It's a way of telling yourself and other people that you've chosen a new direction. Then we explored how native speakers use it in everyday conversations, how it fits naturally into routines, and when other expressions are a better choice.
We also discovered that choosing the right words depends on the situation. Sometimes starting today sounds more suitable. Sometimes I've made up my mind expresses your feelings better. Other times, I'm going to stick with it tells people that you won't give up. That's an important part of becoming a stronger speaker. English isn't about memorizing one perfect sentence. It's about having several natural options and knowing when each one fits best. We also talked about habits that support real progress. Keeping a vocabulary journal, shadowing short conversations, speaking aloud, and reviewing mistakes may seem like small activities, but together they create steady improvement. And don't forget one of my favorite ideas from today's conversation. Consistency is more valuable than trying to be perfect. If you practice for 15 focused minutes every day, those minutes grow into hours, then days, and eventually into real confidence. I think many learners wait until they have more free time, more motivation, or a better plan, but progress usually begins before everything feels perfect. That's why today's phrase is so powerful. It reminds us that the best moment to build a better habit is the moment we decide to begin. Maybe your new habit is reading one English article every morning. Maybe you'll keep a notebook beside your desk. Maybe you'll spend a few minutes speaking aloud while making breakfast. Whatever you choose, make it something you can continue. Small, realistic goals have a wonderful way of becoming lifelong routines. One decision today can lead to hundreds of successful practice sessions in the future. We hope today's conversation has helped you understand not only how native speakers use from now on, but also how you can use it naturally and confidently in your own conversations. Before we finish, we'd love to hear from you. What is one thing you'll do differently with your English from now on? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to read your answers. Keep practicing, stay curious, and enjoy every step of your English journey.